we of course are looking at also getting into NIRF ranking. So obviously, the session is going to be very useful to us.
Thank you. Good morning,
Morning, Dr. Manu. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Great to have you here with us this morning. It's our honor and privilege.
Sure. Thank you for organizing it, you and Dr. Lakshmi Mohan.
Thank you.
So how many are we expecting today?
We are expecting around 40. Okay. 30 have joined in. We are looking at more to join.
Okay, wonderful.
Good morning, buddy, sir.
And we kept it in-house, like we have only our faculty members, from the Kharghar team, and a couple of them probably from Warangal team, okay, and university who would join in.
Nice.
Good morning, buddy, sir. Good morning, Lakshmi.
Good morning, sir. Another 1 minute and we begin. 9:02 we'll start. Begin. It gives me immense pleasure, privilege, honor to introduce Dr. Manu Vora. I welcome you, sir, to ITM Business School for this session on NIRF ranking and how we could improve the quality standards in our institution. I think there is so much about him that probably this 1 or 2 minutes of introduction will not do, but I'm sure with many more introductions, we'll know more about him. But to be brief about, about his experience and expertise, he has about 46 years of leadership experience and has guided about several Fortune 500 companies. He has 28 years as adjunct faculty. So I think it'll be easy for him to relate to what we are. He has contributed at 680 educational institutions worldwide. My God, that's enormous work. He has delivered about 1,100 presentations and published about 70 scholarly articles. He has written several blog posts on quality management, almost 50 of them. I think it would be worth reading. If you can share the link with us, it will be wonderful, sir.
Sure.
He has also given 2 TEDx talks in 2013 in India and USA as well. He has designed and delivered several soft skills programs which has been accessed by around 900,000 people. Again, very huge reach. He was appointed Fulbright Specialist, U.S. Department of State from 2016 to 2023. That goes on. It's an ongoing process. He has been invited member of AICTE NEP, the National Education Policy 2020. I think all of us are quite aware of, and we're all preparing ourselves to be there. And he has also been part of the implementation plan committee. He is President, Blind Foundation for India, 1989 till present. And he has raised huge sponsorship amount for the development of this foundation. And of course, I must mention that he has around 35 awards for lifelong selfless community service. So amazing personality that we have here today. I'm sure that he's going to inspire us to do a lot of good work. 56 awards for outstanding professional contributions. And currently, he is chairman and president, Business Excellence Inc., USA since 2000. Once again, Dr. Manu Vora, we welcome you for this session. And at 10:30, when you could have retired to bed or gone to sleep, you're here with us, spending time with us. So my humble gratitude to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So good morning to all of you. It's my special delight when Professor Mani contacted me. We had a brief talk And you took quick action, and Dr. Lakshmi followed up. So thank you so much. And it's a great delight to share my thoughts about how to improve the NIRF score at a educational institute. And it's not about the score, it's about making the improvement which will ultimately give you the best score. So it's the not focus on the outcome, but focus on the process to get it done. And when you do that, the outcome will be outstanding. Okay. May I request all of you to go on a mute so we don't have any disturbance, please?
Dr. Manu, I also want to make one introduction of a different kind. I
Sure.
want to introduce to you all our faculty, whom I believe are more enthusiastic when it comes to learning than students.
Okay.
And that's how, even if it is 9 a.m. IST, you can see bright smiling faces full of enthusiasm wanting to learn. You did
Yes.
mention somewhere that we took very quick action. It's because of the enthusiasm of Lakshmi and the whole team. And I must mention that across our campuses, be it Warangal, Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, faculty from all these locations are here this morning. And I often feel that their desire to learn sometimes far exceeds the students' desire to learn. And that's what makes them so special. And therefore, I think it's a very, very special day for all of us to have you here, not only giving us a local perspective, but also the global perspective, because you're one of those rare people who's had what I call the global experience, international exposure, being part of several Indian academic commissions, committees, and more than anything else, I think your hunger to share is remarkable. So thank you once again. And I thought I must make this mention about our ever enthusiastic learners, that is our faculty. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Professor Mani. And that's a wonderful news because when people are eager to learn, it's very easy to share a lot more energy and give more information so we can all benefit together. Okay, so the brief roadmap for the morning is I will start with the institute ranking and what builds the brand for a given institute. Then quickly take you through the NIRF process from the Ministry of Education. And the most important thing is, in order to do it well, one has to have a solid structure. So I'll spend a little time on the bullet 3. And to make it real, I will share a specific example from Banaras Hindu University, their NIRF score improvement between 2017 to 2021. And they are also getting tracked on Times Higher Education World University Ranking. So we'll see 2 different examples. And then more focus on the recommendations for any institute to get better in the short term, medium term, and the long term. And I'll summarize the presentation. And I will request all of you to hold the question until the end. And then we will have about half an hour of interaction to go over any questions you may have. So let's begin with the simple fact that the branding of an institute rests on 4 pillars. The first one is outstanding faculty, which you already have. Because of that, you get a great student body. So these 2 are generally in place. The third one is the administration needs to be supportive of the faculty, students, and the entire institution. And the fourth is alumni. Now, my personal experience working at the India scene is sometimes the administration is not very supportive, so things get stalled, and alumni are hardly to be seen anywhere on the ground. So this is one lesson we all need to learn. In the Western world, they put the alumni on the pedestal. You take a look at Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Northwestern, University of Chicago. Alumni sit on the special boards. They bring so many resources, and we'll talk about it. So keeping alumni in the sight and giving them respect, it will get the institute much more return. And some of the recommendations I've been able to make to the committee for NEP implementation This was one of the point I had made, and they all agreed to it. So we'll talk more on it. So keep in mind, you need all four. So stability and growth will come when you focus on all four at the same time. Now we'll quickly run through the Ministry of Education National Institutional Ranking Framework, which actually started in 2016 as an experiment, and 2017 first set of data was collected. Now here is the backbone. There are 5 categories. The first one is teaching, learning, and resources. And of course, all the 5 categories has 100 marks each, but the weightages are different. Category 1, 30%. Second category is research and professional practice, another 30%. So those two are big ones. Graduation outcomes, 20%. Outreach and inclusivity, 10%, and public perception, 10%. So you see, those are the 5 areas under which each of the institute which are applying for NIRF to Ministry of Education, by providing the data, they get scored and ranked from highest to the lowest number. Now, this is a little bit more detailed. For engineering colleges, 17 sub-items, teaching, learning, and resources has 4 sub-items, research and professional practice, another 4, graduation outcomes, another 4, outreach and inclusivity, there are 4 items, and perception, 1 item, peer perception, employers and academic peers. Now, Ministry of Education ranks all 8 different domains. So engineering, colleges, that's art, science, and commerce, management, where you are, law, architecture, medical, pharmaceuticals, and dental. Now, the parameters and weightages vary slightly among each of those domains, and sub-items also vary. So I just wanted to give you a capsule summary of how the government, Ministry of Education, looks at different institutions depending on which domain you are looking at. Now, this is the most important slide. I call it a $64,000 slide. Now, in order to do the project well for NIRF, normally what I have been listening to and hearing from people, that a person is assigned, that person doesn't communicate anything with anyone. He or she will collect the data and submit it through the director or the vice chancellor to the ministry. My approach is slightly different. I'm suggesting that in order to make it more robust, just appoint first a champion based on the person's expertise, experience, proven track record with results, very positive attitude, and a willing volunteer. But you need to create 5 sub-teams because there are 5 categories we just went through. You need to have a person assigned to each of those 5 categories. And that combination of those 5 teams will require a faculty, an alum, and an industry expert. Now, why we bring in those additional people? Because they bring in different perspective. Alum will have the experience from the institute, and they will be working in the industry, so that brings additional resources, and industry expert can tremendously make a big impact in all these areas based on that person's knowledge and ability to bring additional resources. Now, once those teams are in place, they can look at the sub-items and start working on collecting the correct data, not the fluff, and getting the right data collected at the regular interval. And then feeding it to the Ministry of Education is the process. And one can always use project management discipline, which keeps you a focus about it. Have a good quarterly review on the progress on all 5 categories, and hold all the stakeholders accountable for getting the right data, submitting the information on a timely basis. So this simple structure will give you definitely a leg on the ground. And by doing this, you can move forward in an effective way. Now let's review the actual results of Banaras Hindu University between 2017 to 2020. 2021 results have not come out yet. They're about to come out anytime soon. Messages are coming. So BHU always has been at number 3, number 1 being Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Second one, JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University out of New Delhi. And BHU scored number 3 in the top 10 university ranking on the NIRF score. And there are anywhere between 59 to 63 out of 100 overall score. Now, peeling the onion on 5 categories for 2020, the latest score available, BHU improved in 3 areas: teaching, learning, and resources, outreach and inclusivity, and peer perception, but took a step backward in research and professional practice and graduation outcomes. So the focus should be, you need to compare yourself year over year as well as with your peers against whom you are being ranked. And when you are not making progress, that means you have to do gap analysis, why things are going in the wrong direction, and what course of action one can take to recover and move in the positive direction. Here is the snapshot of the Times Higher Education World University ranking for Banaras Hindu University. They are in the 601 to 800 band. And out of top 1,000 universities throughout the world, India has a place somewhere between 30 to 36 max. And we have never crossed in the first 200 or first 250. It's always after that. And BHU in 2021 came in at number 4 among Indian institutions out of 33. And again, when you look at the 5 different categories, slightly different than the NIRF ranking: teaching score, research score, citations, industry income, that's the consulting, and international outlook score. 2 categories made progress in citations and international outlook, but took a backward place in teaching, research, and industry income. So this is how you analyze the data, year over year progress, and looking at things in the perspective that why you are sliding down and what can you do to recover and move forward. So it's an interesting quote from Albert Einstein. It says, education is not the learning of facts, but it's the training of the mind to think. And we all as a faculty, I think we should be first thinking as a faculty, as well as making sure that the students, you don't give them the solution, you challenge them, make them think and find their own solution. You just guide them by providing the resources and let them figure it out themselves. Now we will get into the action area, better ranking recommendations, short term, medium term, and long term. So the first, this year, in the first year of your journey, you can engage the alumni and industry expert who can help in upgrading your curriculum by bringing the industry experience. They bring in the resources. They can help in the placement, governance. You can always leverage their expertise, experience, knowledge, and wisdom. Second one, you need to strengthen your strategic planning process around NIRF itself by creating the vision, the mission, the values, goals, and objectives. And the third bullet, which is missing in most of the institution, is You need to communicate that mission critical project to all stakeholders, both internal and external of your institute, which will create the awareness, excitement, and sense of ownership. And the most important thing is, instead of manually collecting the data, create a automated data collection portal. And those people who are responsible, they should be feeding in the data on a regular interval, and make sure that you manage it by exception only, so you don't have to keep reminding people that the information is due. They provide the right input when it's required, and only those people who are tardy, they should get the reminder. Other than that, 90 to 95% of the people should be sending the data on a timely basis. And if you could do 100%, so much more power to you. So easy to collect and compile the data for better reporting, and hold everyone responsible, stakeholders, to accountable for the results. Now, one thing is, we can all learn from Dr. Deming's cycle for continuous improvement. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Dr. Deming, the stalwart of quality, sent by the US government to Japan after World War II to rebuild the industrial economy. And his cycle is very instructive: plan, do, study, and act. Previous version was plan, do, check, and act. During later part of his life, Dr. Deming didn't like the check, saying it's a inspection connotation. So he says substitute check with study. Now, all you need is, for any project you undertake, you need excellent 10% plan, but you need 90% flawless execution. When you do that combination, you are more likely to get a success at the end. Interesting thing to remember, planning without execution is futile, but the execution without planning could be fatal. And my one comment at the India scene is, generally there is not much focus on planning. Things happen on the spur of the moment. Most of the time it works out fine. But when things don't happen as it was supposed to be, then you watch out. So planning needs more focus in India. Now I want to introduce a very simple model, learning effectiveness model, the acronym CEO. So I've been teaching since 1993. Right from the beginning, when I started teaching with the industry experience, I understood the value, and I was teaching quality management, supply chain, project management, risk management, etc. All those disciplines in reality at the workplace requires work to be done in the team. So form a team in the classroom and expect cooperation and collaboration from everybody so that they learn from each other. Big focus on peer learning. Experiential. In my classes, they study somewhere between 8 to 10 state-of-the-art case studies, articles from Harvard Business School, MIT Sloan Management Review, McKinsey Quarterly, Inc., Forbes, etc. And they are all assigned to work in a team to work on a project. And then at the end of the semester, they write up the project report and make a presentation to the peers by the teams, and outcome based. So I've created a very simple reflection journal with the 3 items. What are the 3 new learnings you got out of the course? What are the 3 lessons you will implement once you are in the workplace? And what's your plan how to implement those 3 new learnings? By writing it down, it will sort of prompt them to take some proper action once they are back at their workplace, and big focus on implementation. And this is another way when we do the faculty development program, we need to be looking into this direction, and I'll make that comment based on the experience with the AICTE recently when the orientation session was held. So faculty excellence model, I've chosen a simple acronym which is famous in India, CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. So faculty should be learning in a collaborative way rather than solo, but under the guidance of expert faculty in a scientific manner, but lots of introspection and lot of reflection. And this is the best value faculty can get. And we recently concluded a major program on rolling out NEP 2020 with 16 leaders at the vice chancellor, director, principal level from 8 different institutes in 4 different states. And we just graduated them yesterday morning. And it was a wonderful experience. They all worked very hard for 7 weekends, 3 hours every Saturday. And we had a lot of fun working together. Now in Sanskrit, the teachers have many forms. So at a beginning stage, when we are just sharing the information, we are all Adhyapak. Once we start blending knowledge with the information, we become Upadhyay. When we share the skills, we become Acharya. When we share the real insight, we become Pandit. And when we share the visionary thinking, you are Drishta. And of course, at the final stage, when you give the life's wisdom, you become the guru. So all of us as a faculty, we should strive to move from the Adhyapak to the guru stage. And it's a lifelong pursuit. An interesting thing to remember, the faculties educate students by engaging, energizing, entertaining, and empowering them. And we need to use all these levers as appropriate to engage our students in the classroom. And this is the learner engagement model, which was crystallized when I was at my alma mater, IIT BHU in Varanasi, doing my first Fulbright Specialist project, that in my classes, I've been observing that my students need to be involved in their own learning. And when they are learning, they apply it right away. And they are required to share with the classmates. So involve, learn, apply, and share. Simple but elegant model will create a lot of learner engagement. I'm hearing some noise. May I request all of you to remain on a mute, please? Thank you. Now, here is the interesting slides on 12 keys to the kingdom for learners' engagement to create magic in the classroom. And the 12 keys are, when you are starting a class, pick a student and assign a topic to research and ask the student to come back and share in the classroom what he or she has figured out about the topic, and keep rotating them. As a faculty, we need to share the importance of the topic and real world application to excite everybody. And as an icebreaker, you start asking some topical questions to everyone in the class. And I generally do the pre-polling before the session to understand where they are coming from. And then as a faculty, we need to really focus on the basic concepts and principles so they don't have to memorize anything. And always allow the curiosity, innovativeness to flourish in the classroom. And at the end of the module, make sure you get the input from everyone. What are the key takeaways they're getting from the program and the module that day? Now, Harvard Business Publishing gave several items which I have borrowed from 8 to 11. You can conduct short polls or voting. You can create some role plays. So I have a small group set up to discuss the item briefly, come back and share it with the wider group. Form the team to work in the project and share their project findings at the end. Always, you can invite a guest speaker to have a broader perspective. And most important, as a faculty, we must replenish our knowledge on a regular basis so that we are at the cutting edge and we give the cutting edge information to our learners. And if we do all that, we get a gold star. Now, we are looking at the second aspect, the medium-term actions, 2022 and 2023. And this is where I think we can start looking at the internal best practices, the benchmarking on key parameters to find the pockets of excellence and leverage those pockets of excellence to propagate those practices throughout your other areas. We can always conduct the external benchmarking with top Indian Education Institute. I mentioned Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, as well as JNU. Learn from them for each of those 5 major areas, why they are so high in ranking and what are their best practices which you can emulate at your institute. And you can conduct also after the external benchmarking within India scene, you can go outside with the top world education institutes, Oxford, Stanford, etc. They are always in the top 5 to top 10 and look at their best practices and bring it in-house. And I'm going to focus on accelerating the NEP 2020 implementation. And I'll share with you the short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals established by the implementation plan committee and make sure that the people who are assigned to this effort are responsible to bring the results. So let's continue on the medium-term actions. So education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And this applies to the NEP 2020, which is a game changer. If we do it well in the next 15 years, India will be at the pinnacle and could become the source of inspiration throughout the world. So on July 29, central government approved in 2020 the National Education Policy 2020. And I'll focus on the implementation plan. So there were a number of experts who were roped in, roughly around 30 experts from throughout India, sat through a number of presentations and committees. And the final committee was chartered for 10 days, roughly 22nd to 31st of October. And I had some conversation via email with Chairman Sri Anil Sahasrabudhe. He liked some of the ideas I was sharing, so he invited me to join the team. And it was a great honor to work with 9 distinguished educationists from various parts of India. The team was headed by Professor Sanjay Dande, and he has been the past director of the IIT Kanpur, etc., and currently in a very responsible position. And we had a lot of deliberation. Committee met essentially through digital means, and it was late afternoon, so I gave all my input for those days through email. And the team focused on 9 different areas: multidisciplinary and holistic education, equity and inclusion in higher education, research, innovation and rankings, global outreach of higher education, most important focus on motivating, energizing, and finding capable faculty, integration of higher education system, governance and regulation, promotion of Indian languages, arts and culture, and technology use and integration. Now, 3 different goals, short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals were pulled together. And highlight of these is that there should be increased interaction between the departments within an institute, 60% foundation courses, 20% program elective, and 20% open electives, so give more flexibility to students. Use the mix of delivery, face-to-face, online, and blended, and revise the curriculum with the appropriate assessment tools and make the bridge courses. And also promoting the use of mother tongue at all levels, primary, secondary, and higher education. One innovative approach was credit recognition and transfer by setting up an academic bank of credit, and big focus on vocational education. In medium term 2022 to 2025, a greater mobility of students in India, and establish education department at all higher education institutes. We talked about vocational education focus, and the implementation should be in all aspects of education, the professional, the technical, the liberal, medical, law, agriculture, etc. And importance of including the higher education, mother tongue and local languages. And in the long term, that the last 10 years, 2016 to 2035, that the original vision statement of the national education policy should be achieved successfully. Get rid of the fragmentation of the higher education system, and establish and transform at least one HEI into large multidisciplinary higher education institute in or near every district, and promote Sanskrit, use of Sanskrit at the university level. So now I'll share with you some of insight based on my years of experience witnessing, leading, coaching change journeys. So implementation of NEP 2020 for next 15 years is more like a transformation journey, like going to Mount Everest. And in order to have that journey, we need to prepare well. And the foundation for that sustainable change or transformation is three pillars: the leadership, which should set the direction and lead the change. You need the talent management, these are the employees who are going to implement the change. And you need the project management as a backbone to facilitate the change and make sure things are happening as planned. And I'm very happy to share that since 1985, very fortunate to see leading and coaching 15 change management journeys, including one in education in USA, K through 12 education system, 2 government entities in Egypt and Turkey, 8 entities at corporate level in US, 2 in the professional setting, and 2 in the nonprofit setting. One of the framework I've been very familiar with is the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework since '89, which is self-assessment, allows you to look at holistically for your institute on 7 categories: where you are you, where is your area of strength, and where you have gaps, that means opportunities for improvement. And also as a backbone to the change management, I've delivered project management and risk management courses globally. Now, another insight based on the successful change journey, that in order to carry out the change successfully, you need the 3 C's to work together in tandem. So the CEO, which is generally the vice chancellor or the director at the institute, CFO, generally the registrar, so those 2 are in place. But the missing piece is chief people officer. So in industry, they have all 3 in place. So when the change needs to be managed, the CEO creates the change and provides the direction. They need the right people to carry out the change. So that's where chief people officer comes in play. And then you need the appropriate resources, money, and whatever other resources you need through CFO. So keep in mind, unless you have 3 C's in place, your change journey will not be successful and it will not be fully optimal. Now, I'd also given some specific recommendation to the implementation plan committee that in order to deploy the NEP 2020, we need to systematically train people, the faculties at various levels. First at the administration and leadership level, teach them the sustainable change management modules on sustainability, the leadership, the talent management, and project management, the foundation we just saw, US Baldrige framework for self-assessment. And one important aspect is importance of community service, both by the students and the faculty. Interestingly, as I mentioned, we just completed a major module FDP on combining these three for 21 hours. And in community surveys, by doing a quick back of the envelope calculation, it turns out that if we take all the higher education institute, and if we put students for 8 months, once a week, 2 hours, we can have 64 billion hours of Shramdan, 64 billion hours of community service by reaching out to the communities surrounding the campuses, finding out their needs, creating appropriate projects, putting the students in team along with the faculty and alum and industry person, and add real value and solve societal problems. So this is a really very critical thing we are missing at the India scene. And down the road, we can pick up on this community service importance module when the time is appropriate at ITM. We are just beginning to offer the next two project management and risk management FDPs. Again, each one of them 22 hours each. Month of July, project management, month of August, risk management. And it will be interactive, reflective. They have to study the articles, case studies, and then they are going to do real projects in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals stipulated by AICTE. They pick and choose what they want to work on and then create a blueprint. And that will be shared across all the participants so their institute can benefit on the learning on a collective basis. And of course, soft skills for all faculties. And we have done this one module because in real life we do project. And in order to do project well, one need to understand the importance of leadership, the decision-making, time management, teamwork, and ultimately project management. And we have taught this soft skill program both to students and the faculties with a very rigorous assignment, and 78 faculties were trained from 16 different institutes during November, December, and they were all certified to become the instructor to teach that in their own institutions. So by doing this proper learning in the faculty development program, unlike the current state of affairs where people sign up for FDP, they attend it solo, no discussion, no directions from others, no interactions. They take the test, get the certificate, and they are happy. Outcome is in doubt. Spending so much money and resources and time, whatever we do, we need to make it effective to start with. So just quickly, I'll walk through some of the items AICTE currently doing. 21, 22, 2022, they have 123 new emerging areas FDPs planned, and about 970 plus FDPs have been approved. And I was able to give the input for proper deployment of NEP 2020, 10 of them, and they were all accepted and included. And Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Pokhriyalji, unveiled this program on 17th, and I'll show you the glimpse of it shortly. So sustainable change management, Baldrige community service importance, project management, risk management, and soft skill 5 areas: leadership, decision-making, time management, teamwork, and project management. Now, AICTE is working with the National Institute of Technical Teachers Training and Research Centers from 4 different locations. And I'll be working with the coordinators on emerging pedagogy, institutional management for entrepreneurship, and institutional assessment. And these are higher level modules, 12 of them, which will be required by all associate, assistant, and associate professors at all technical institutes. And in polytechnics, up to the principal level, have to take this program. So here is the glimpse they showed when the minister unveiled inaugurated the faculty development program calendar on 17th, but on 11th they had a orientation session. You see the chairman Anil Sahasrabudheji with the white beard, and then vice chairman Punyaji here, member secretary Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Atal FBP director Dr. Soni, and another regional officer here. And they gave me about 15 minutes to talk about suggestions on design and delivery of effective AICTE Atal FTPs. So about last year, close to about 1.6 lakh people, faculty, got the learning on FDPs delivered by 7,000 experts, including 25 countries outside of India which participated. There were 32 experts from USA, and some of them happened at the late night US time. Now I want to segue into one very important item, which is the one I've been working on for the last 8 years at the India scene, soft skills importance. So if you take a look at the latest surveys, the executives who are hiring are clamoring for people with better soft skill compared to the hard or technical skills. Because students only focus on the technical or the hard skills and they neglect the soft skills. The last bullet is very important to focus on. That is, the ability to work in a team for a new hire is more desirable than analytical or quantitative skills. So the request is the people who are graduating from the top university and any institute in India, if they are deficient in soft skills, they will have a hard time finding a good placement. And even if they find the placement, they will not be able to hold the job or make progress in their journey in life. So we talked very high level, 5 modules, which are all connected: leadership, decision-making, time management, teamwork, and the project management. And keep in mind that in the 21st century, we need to learn 3 critical skills. One is teamwork, second problem solving, and third project management. In addition to the 20th century, we needed to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. So as the world evolves, we need to keep learning new things. Now, since you are National Board of Accreditation program, you are working with that. These are the graduate attributes required in India from the engineering side. The knowledge base of engineering, problem analysis, investigation, design, and use of engineering tools. These are the hard skills which are covered. But items shown in red are the soft skills. Most of them are not adequately covered or not covered at all. So these are the major challenges and the gaps. I'm sure most of you would have seen this World Economic Forum Future of Job reports. What are the critical skills needed? 10 of them in 2022. Focus on the left-hand side. 4 items shown in color coding have repeated from 2020 at different positions. And if you reflect on those 10 items on the left-hand column, most of these items are not adequately covered or not covered at all at most of the education institutes, leaving aside some exception. So this is what the industry is looking for when you send your graduates to work for the companies. But if they don't have any knowledge and the skills about these areas, they are not going to be effective. So it's very important to focus on the areas and introduce them as in the curriculum, so they are ready and they can keep learning more in those disciplines and build up their skills. Last item is the long-term actions. So here, based on the experience of the US Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework in Education, our institute in India, we can leverage the positive experience since 2001 to do self-assessment using the world-class framework, which has been copied all over the world. including Tata's, which adopted it in 1994. 100% Tata Business Excellence model is a duplicate of US Baldrige Excellence Framework, and find out where you are strong at, maintain them, and find out where you are weak, what are the gaps, and create the opportunities for improvements, and have the prioritization and act on the areas for improvement, create an execution discipline. And I think this is what is needed. In India, we are very good at talking when time comes. So we are good at talk and debate. Time for come for action, the entire ground is open because people have shifted to next big debate. Nobody wants to do any action, just talk and talk and talk. And of course, hold all the stakeholders who are working on this NIT project accountable for results. So here is the quick bird's eye view of the Baldrige framework. 7 categories starts with leadership, which is more like an engine. Without that, nothing will happen. And ultimate focus is to achieve results. Other 6 categories: strategic planning, customer focus, measurement analysis, knowledge management, workforce focus, operations focus. Those are the underlying processes. And through these processes, you achieve the sustainable results for number of years and use the guidelines, which are essentially, they keep updating it since the introduction in 1988. First set of awards were given out. Every 2 years, they keep improving the guidelines based on the feedback from the examiners, senior examiners, and judges, what they see on the ground. But the categories have remained same. Sub-items within the category may change, but assessing your organization to improve and use the feedback received from these Baldrige examiners is of great value. So in summary, the NIRP improvement project is a transformation journey. And in order to have that journey well, with all the preparation, we will need to have a laser sharp focus on a wartime footing by empowering all the stakeholders and prepare them for the successful journey. We already talked about the importance of alumni and industry experts to look for their contribution by using their expertise, experience, knowledge, and wisdom, and make sure that the people who are engaged in this project, they get relevant training in project management, risk management, etc. Of course, NEP 2020 will require a lot more training to do it well. Otherwise, it's more like a shotgun approach. You do certain things, pick and choose few items here and there, and everybody's doing things in a random fashion. The ultimate outcome will not be good. We'll be asking the same question, what happened after 15 years, unless we have a systematic framework and a plan of action to travel that journey. We can always look for the global best practices, insist on the execution discipline, and have accountability for the results. So at the end, we can look at Benjamin Franklin. He says an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So this NEP 2020 requires tremendous focus. And one of the measurement you can have is an IRF score, NBA ranking, World University ranking, QS ranking, etc. Those rankings are the outcome, but the real effort should be on improvement for your institute to satisfy and serve your stakeholders. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation, and I want to thank all of you for listening to a few thoughts, and let's open up for questions, discussions. And my suggestion is best thing to do it, bring it in the chat, and if Dr. Lakshmi can moderate it, it will be the best way to make use of the time.
So questions are welcome, and thanks, Dr. Manu Vora. It was a wonderful, crisp presentation.
Thank you.
I must also mention that I'm fortunate to be, and all of us are fortunate to be with a very progressive institution like ITM, where we have a 5 months industry internship for our students. Uh, we uh, we are about 30 years now and felt the need for creating an industry aligned program.
Mhm.
And that's where we brought in this 5 months of industry internship, where the students are guided by a company mentor as well as a faculty mentor.
Okay.
At the same time, we also have a 2 weeks of NGO internship. So here, to be precise, I think last year we put in about 75,000 hours of social interventions, and that was through our students who are again guided by faculty members. And we have a corporate social initiative department which manages this. In fact, this year we want to progress further by starting a social innovation lab where we invite students to at least give in 2 hours of social work in a week, and that could eventually become a habit, and you can turn out to be better leaders who are inclined towards serving the society as well. So that is another thing. When it comes to soft skills, again we brought in a big change by creating an army called Tailwind, and these faculty members train the students for almost close to 300 hours.
Mhm.
So we brought in the soft skills program also to build in those the critical thinking, uh, the aptitude that is needed for you to be an entrepreneur, or to be in the industry, and so many such things. Also the corporate transition module, where you are the classroom, but do you know the corporate, and how do you really get into the corporate, and so on. So yes,
Yeah.
we have been working on improving the program, and fortunately for us, being an autonomous program, which is of course approved by AICT, we keep tweaking and aligning it to suit the curriculum, to suit the industry. We also
Nice.
have industry experts that include industry professionals and alums. They are also part of our BOG, the governing body.
Mhm.
At the same time, we also have frequent quarterly board of studies meets, where these industry professionals also guide us on what changes we need to bring in. For instance, this year we have included something called a leadership lab, and we have created modules which can actually build in those skills, and it will not be a monologue. It will be an interactive kind of sessions where the students will have an insight about what's the kind of improvement that they need to bring in. So we've created that. We also have brought in something like futuristic technologies or business transformation practices for every
Mhm.
batch, which we felt is a need today.
Yeah.
Also considering that there's so much that's happening in the area of AI, ML, and it's not just the technology guys who need to know this. It is the entire cohort of students who must be aware of how technology is moving.
Yeah.
So many such changes. I think there are some questions that are coming on the chat, so
Yeah.
I'll
And
read it
those
out for
are
you.
wonderful initiatives, Dr. Lakshmi, you mentioned. So I'm very delighted that you're forward looking and doing all those things which are necessary to become the best you can give to the students. So wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So here is Dr. Neena, who wants to know, among the various criteria in NIRF, which criteria carries most weightage? Is it research, teaching? Is it research, teaching, and learning, or outreach? Right?
Okay, so 30% on teaching and learning, 30% on research. So those are the two top ones, 30-30. Then it drops down to 20%, then 10 and 10. So graduation outcome is 20%, outreach is 10%, and perception is 10%. So these are some of the early slides I went through, and I'll be happy to share the presentation with you, Dr. Lakshmi, and you can share it with everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Because more we share, we all learn.
Right. So there is another question. Can you share one of the two best pedagogies that emphasize on building critical thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think my experience and whatever I've been seeing both in the industry as well as in the academia, we do a lot of things mechanically. We don't take time to reflect and introspect. So if we are really serious about learning something, then we need to take time, work in a team, learn each other's perspective, and build on everybody's idea. So teamwork, big focus. That is what is required in the industry, and we are not preparing our students that well. So I remember my experience undergraduate from the one of the best institute, BHU, now IIT BHU. All the projects were solo. There was no interaction with anybody. Even the faculty are so busy, you just do whatever you can and then get done. So that is essentially we are passing time, not doing something which is meaningful at the end of the day, and working on a lot of hypothetical things instead of real value added projects. So bottom line, teamwork and reflection and introspection. If we can bring those as a part of pedagogy, it will serve India well. And that is the order of the day and call for the day.
And I remember you mentioned this, at the end of your course or, certain topics, maybe, we should ask the students, what are your new learnings? What are those lessons that you will implement? And how are you going to implement the same? So that was really interesting. I think that's what actually leads to outcome-based education. Wonderful. There is this question from Dr. Sarit, our dean. She's asked, do you want to speak up, Dr. Sarit? Sir, I would like that she ask the question herself.
Okay, go ahead.
We're not able to hear you, ma'am.
Very precise and comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. We must compliment on behalf of all the faculty members present over here. And almost all the slides are very, very clear. And I have taken note of 80% of the slides also. So only thing my anxiety to know about US universities, what are the basic ways that you manage talent?
Yeah.
In terms of faculty talent management.
Yeah, so I think there is a big focus on mentoring the faculty. When the new faculty join, the people with the experience, they team up and try to bring them on board. So orientation, mentoring, and this is also done at the industry level, because I have witnessed that when I joined AT&T Bell Labs, going from chemical to telecommunication, it was a big shock for me. I had zero knowledge about telco industry, but AT&T was expanding after the breakup. So they were hiring people left and right with the higher education, and then train them in a new discipline. But orientation, mentoring, support from the experienced people, and these are some of the things we can emulate very quickly within the India scene. And that builds the camaraderie and the respect for people. See, the people who are there for a longer term, they have the experience, but the new people who are joining, they have some new ideas, they have the energy. We need to match both of them up and form the buddy system so everybody benefits and the institute benefits at the end. And particularly the retention of the good faculty requires special effort. You cannot take them for granted. If the faculty is good and they are contributing, you want to make sure that they are well taken care of in terms of the resources they need for the research, for the teaching. Give them space and encourage them to do out of the box work and engage with students, etc. So the old model of coming up with the 40 years old slides and teaching the same thing again and again doesn't cut it anymore. So we just have to get out of our comfort zone and pick up the new discipline and start training ourselves well first so that we can do best for our students. And that's what I do, because I just want to share with you, we should be the lifelong students, right? I just completed 75 years last October. Constantly, I'm getting input from Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan, McKinsey Quarterly. I keep reading, replenishing my knowledge, putting it in my data bank, and keep using it as appropriate. I keep giving talks. I've given about 100 webinars during the pandemic, and keep sharing and keep learning from others, from my students, from my co-workers, colleagues, etc.
Sir, one more question. What about your idea of abolishing end term examination or having no sort of examination, only go for a continuous evaluation or internal assessment for Indian students?
Okay, you have wonderful question. And so I can tell you from my 28 years of teaching experience at top schools here in the Chicago area, Northwestern, Illinois Institute of Tech, etc. Right from the beginning, my focus is I put 3 evaluation schemes and no exams, no midterm, no final. So first, they need to read about 8 to 10 articles throughout the 12 to 16 week semester. And article reading, I've developed a very special way they need to read. And that is, they read individually and then they read it in the team, reflect on it on 3 things. What are the key principles and practices they are getting from the article? Secondly, they need to do reflection based on their experience working in the past as well as current. Can they see the connection between the principle and their practice? And the third, what are the few key takeaways from the article? So this is done individually, then collectively they write up 2 short pages, less is more. And then I pair them up in the 2 groups. So they debate with each other. So I call them intellectual warfare. They had to learn from each other's perspective, and then they get graded on the based on what they have put in, particularly more focus on bridging the gap between theory and practice. So that's one evaluation. Second one, for all the 10, 12, 16 week, whatever is the program, they need to answer on the discussion board a question posed, which is in alignment with the topic for that week. And then they have to reflect on 2 other students' viewpoint and keep the thread going. That's second one. And third one, about 50% weight on actual projects in the team, starting from day 1 till the end of the program. So the schedule is fixed and they can pick up any project they want to work on. I suggest some projects on the project management, risk management, etc., even in quality discipline. But they have to do a fair amount of benchmarking, look at some of the best practices. I provide lots of templates to them. So they have the shell, they have to put the information inside those structured templates. And they write up the report. And at the end, there's a presentation where I allow the peer grading as well. So they step up how to evaluate everybody else's project, because once they join the industry, they will be sitting on reviewing the projects, etc. So absolutely no exam, all practical learning and letting me know what they've learned from the class. Are they able to apply within those 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 16 weeks semester or quarter system? And I've been lucky. I don't get any pressure, and I'm a very generous grader. I make them work so hard, and if they work all hard, then I give all of them an A. My schools are okay here. They don't pick on me for giving all A's. So at the end of the day, I think it's the effort they put in and the new learning they take it back with them in the industry. That's what makes a difference. So currently I'm just finishing my course at Northwestern University. I have 9 students, 3 teams doing 3 different projects. I coach them right from the beginning to the end on the project, so they understand the nuances of doing the project well without any fear of grading throughout the semester. And at the end, they write up the report and I do the grading at that point. So fair amount of involvement, and this requires more effort on the part of faculty to be engaged one-on-one with everyone, because each one of your students are your customers. They're all important, not just the few. So those are some of the ideas. And your question, I really liked it. If India can get away from this examination culture, we will be doing much better, because we are squashing the creativity of our students. They're constantly under stress for exams. So it is like mugging up and vomiting, mugging up and vomiting. And that is not serving anybody. I think we need to give them time and space to learn and make sure that they are learning. And that is where the faculty needs to do extra effort. So thank you for asking that question, Dr. Das.
Yeah, and thank you so much, sir, for this very relevant points that you made about examination. In fact, we have been, I think we have had a couple of strategic meetings on what we need to do in place of these examinations. And now with everything happening online, these are all, we call them speed exams. We
Yeah.
give them multiple choice questions. I mean, it doesn't really sound of any value. And so
Correct.
what we're going to do is the new batch, that is the 21-23 batch that's coming in, we are going to do away with exams for the first semester. That's our experiment that we are going to try out. But of course, we will include projects and, even class participation and so many other ways of finding out whether the student is in a progressive mode or not. So I
Correct.
think we also are planning to do away with exams. We may not have exams in coming times.
Yeah, congratulations. You are on the right track. Keep
Yeah,
going.
so in India, if you see, it's quite a challenge. Also considering the fact that, each of our classes have around 60 students. So for for a batch, management batch that we have 60 students. So how do we really manage this is the question. But then, yes, we may have to double up our efforts, be in touch with every student and try this out maybe. And also we're looking at creating teaching assistants for the faculties. So
Yeah,
that would help us. Yeah.
yeah. I want to add something here, Dr. Lakshmi. I have taught at a Great Lake Institute of Management in Chennai, one of the top business schools, number of years. Several years, I had 108 to 112 students in the class and gave them 20 hours of total quality management module, but each one of them was engaged in reading the articles, doing the summary. Then I gave them specifically the different categories of the Baldrige to analyze the cases and then write up and present the report and share it with the rest of the groups. So there are ways to engage them. And main thing is, if you give them clear instruction, what is expected of them right up front, and don't keep changing it, and have the discipline to follow through, and you have to put in so much effort, like that 20 hours on a campus for 1 week. Right after the class is over, I have to do so much work with them and keep doing my effort. So instead of 20 hours, it's 60 hours a week. Then you add good value, and people appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this also makes it clear for us that though the numbers may be large, the involvement has to be doubled up and we should be able to connect with the students. Yeah.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah, Dr. Satish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, very good morning, sir.
Good
So
morning.
my query is that is the curriculum really quantitatively or qualitatively will be scrutinized by at the time of ranking? Because number of courses, is it 12, 15 courses in semester, or is it a 7, 8? Is it a quantitative or a qualitatively you perceive that?
Are you asking about the US system?
No, sir, Indian system.
Indian system. So the question is about
Curriculum,
12.
number of subjects, and means number of credits. People, some business schools or some institutes, they are going behind of the number of credits also. So is it really quantitatively we need to look into that, or qualitatively we need to look into that to gauge our what you can say surge in our ranking?
Yeah, so I think for a given semester, I don't know what is your norm there. How many courses do you teach for a given semester? About 5 or 6 max.
We have around 10 to 12 courses at an average in semester.
So 10 to 12 courses for how many weeks? You're talking about 3 months,
Yes, 4 months to 6 months
4
average.
months, 4 to 6 months. Okay. But each one of them going for a 4 months continuously, or is it some are halfway and then the next one start?
Few are off credit courses, and some rest of the courses will go for 4 months continuous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so Dr. Satish is from Warangal, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, from Warangal. But again, it varies from institute to institute, also understanding what is the kind of the number of faculty members. So for ITM Kargar, typically, I think it would not be more than 4 courses maximum. Sarit ma'am,
What?
the number of courses that a faculty teaches.
No, ma'am.
Throughout the year, it is 6 courses, sir. So like 180 hours. But
yeah,
in a semester, yeah, 3 to 4. So it will be like 90 hours to 120 maximum.
Okay,
yeah,
and I think Dr. Satish is talking about overall total number of courses, right?
No,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So
My point of view is that for the ranking, what is the role of curriculum it plays? Is it a number of courses in a entire course? Is that, or qualitatively do they check up? Is the number of specializations kind of a thing, or paper qualities, or
okay,
the numbers? Like that's what I'm saying. I'm not about the quality workload of the faculty. I'm talking.
okay. So you're talking about whether it is number of courses that will be taken into account or
For
the kind of quality that each of these courses carry, right?
as you have been
Yes,
writing
Dr. Man.
something about like
yeah,
IIT. As you are
Okay, okay. I'll talk about that, Satish. So see, in a typical MBA where we have already implemented, so every good institute have to have a standard, and that standard we show is 6 courses, that is 180 hours. Now
hmm,
further, this is what about quantity, then quality. So when it comes to quality, we need to see the faculty student feedback for each course
yeah,
taught by the faculty, and then go for a review. And on that basis, it is again NBA evaluates us. So NBA evaluates us in terms of quality that we deliver, and that comes from a student feedback. So that is what, this is the way it has been done in the last review. And Dr. Manu can further add. And so
yeah. I think
quantity is important, but quality is also seen. And they
yeah,
also ask, okay, what is the action taken if a faculty consistently score less than 7 in a 10-point scale? And we need to even, yeah, I myself had prepared that report. And then
mm,
we have to write what action we had taken, we had counseled, or what we did, whether it has improved. All these have to be done. So
mm,
that they because it is our quality standard, right? So they
yeah,
need to know what are the steps we are taking in case there is a gap in the desirable quality and the real actual quality, that is.
correct. Yeah, I think my simple comment will be that whatever curriculum you have designed, you try to find the best faculty to deliver it, right? So first give the faculty some additional coaching training needed so that they are the best. And of course, we know the standard saying, if you don't know the subject, you start teaching it and then you will become expert at it eventually, right? So uh, at least encourage the expert faculty to work with the new faculty to pick up some new discipline and give them confidence by working with them. And quality should be paramount, and then the quantity. Because I come from quality discipline. If we keep doing things which has no real outcome or no real value, it's a waste of time and resources for the institute, for the faculty, and for the students. So there is no outcome for it. So my basic answer will be focus on quality by empowering the faculty, whatever additional skills they need to pick up, give them that opportunity to do it. And when they have that knowledge, they will be more confident to deliver it in a positive way. And you can have some town hall meetings where the experienced people can share their experiences with the newcomers and get them to see different ways where they can emulate and become the better way of delivering it. So that will be my suggestion. Keep leveraging your expertise on the ground rather than people working in the silos. And we do enough of that already. So if you can break down the silos and build on each other's expertise and knowledge, I think you will be much more powerful, and then you can deliver it the best way. So sorry, I could not be very specific on what the standard is looking for, but it's up to you, right? You are autonomous, so you set the schedule. These are the courses you want to cover, for which there has to be certain outcomes, and those outcomes are focusing on quality first, and then covering all that. So those both needs to be satisfied.
Yeah, Dr. Prasad from Warangal has a question. He's the director of the Warangal campus. I'm not able to see him, but I'll read out the question. Is it required to have 13 courses in a semester? In the sense, I think what he means is AICT prescribes 1,080 hours, 1,050 hours, I suppose, for the PGDM program. So
Okay.
that makes it, we have divided these into the various courses that we have in each of these semesters. So he's asking whether it is necessary to have 13 courses in one semester.
Now just think of it physically. Is it possible to do 13 courses by the students? How many they will be taking? So we need to be mindful of the capacity of the students also. If you overload them, the outcome will be they will go through it, but the learning will not be the best, right? So if you could figure out a way to meet the requirements, but do it in a systematic way. So what I learned at the Great Lakes is that they had 70% of the foreign faculty coming on the ground 1 week at a time, deliver 20 hours, and they go away, including the assessment and evaluation, all done. And of course, they were using the grading curve, so there I had no choice. I just leave it to them, whatever number they want to give, A, B, C, etc. But that was their model to accommodate all the hours needed to be done. 20 hours per module, about 3 or 4 modules running per day. So students pick up on a lottery basis which courses they want to get into. So I think not knowing exactly what's working on the ground there, I may not be able to give you the comment, but here I've seen the amount of courses students take is roughly, it's a 3 hours a credit course. They take no more than 5 courses. 4 is ideal because that's, and you're talking about full-time 4 courses. So 12 hours is the ideal they take. And these are 16 weeks program. And they meet roughly about 2.5 hours per week class time. Yeah, so that's a sense of idea from the US side. And of course, India things are slightly different. To accommodate the masses, you may have to make the adjustment, but meet the needs in a better way by making it meaningful for people, because loading them up is not the real solution at the end. Okay, time for one more question.
So here's a question from our alumni department's head, Ms. Richa. She wants to know, some of the best practices that can be applied for alumni engagement.
Yeah, so first of all, do you have a database of all the graduates who come out in the last 20, who came out in the last 21 years? So that should be the first effort. Secondly, you make an effort to connect with them. So see, the alumni works best when you have a good relationship with them. And other thing to keep in mind is don't keep asking for money from the alum. There's a saying, if you ask for money, they'll give you advice. But if you ask for advice, they will give you money also along with the advice. So build the relationship with your alumni and those who are on a fast track and doing well in the corporate world. They are the right people who will come back because they have so much positive thing for your institute. If you keep the relationship with them without expectation of money and think of time, talent, energy, and then the treasure, that's how you engage your alumni and allow them to contribute at your institute by inviting them to give the guest lectures, put them on the advisory board. Some of the things you are already doing it, but you can accelerate some of those in each department for each area like marketing, finance, accounting. You can have a separate board and have more interactions with them. They bring in the real knowledge of what is needed on the ground. So alumni interaction, and you can study some best practices like Harvard, Stanford, MIT. What do? They have billions and billions of dollars of money sitting in the kitty. Why? Because they respect their alumni. They give them a tremendous amount of respect by bringing them into the university, and a lot of them sit on the board of trustees as well, and they bring huge amount of resources with them, not just the money but the knowledge and the talent they bring. That's invaluable. And continue to build the relationship by creating a database. When they make some good progress, they get promotion, send some nice notes, put them in your newsletters, promote them well within the institute. And you can even send your students to go and visit them on site for half a day or a few hours and see what they do, follow them, and that can inspire them to do well like the alums are doing. So these are a few thoughts, and I'm sure all of you are very smart and articulate, so you can figure out some better ways of engaging your alumni.
Thank you so much, sir. Very valuable points that you mentioned about how we could build relationship with our alums. We have been doing it, but yes, I think there is more to do. And like you said, yes, we'll also look into the best practices of other institutes, which will give us an idea on how we can kind of benchmark and also improve our own system.
Definitely.
There is one last question from our Associate Dean, Dr. Sapna Modi, who's also the champion for our NBA. She is asking whether there is any difference between the criteria for NIRF and NBA. I mean,
yeah, I have not studied. So I have not studied NBA. I tried to look into it and then decided let me focus only on the one, NIRF, because I'm very familiar with it. I started looking at it for IIT Bombay and other places, BHU. I gave this talk to about 3-4 places. NBA, see, at the end of the day, all this, all the criterias and all these programs are trying to measure what you have put in place. Are you delivering it? And what is your level of meeting those requirements? So one difference I see is, in general, we are all in India focused on compliance rather than look for excellence. So this is where I would make a humble request that look at the Baldrige model, which is focused on excellence on all dimensions, rather than doing the bare minimum to get your ranking for NBA or for NIRF. Look for overall excellence. And when your overall excellence goes up, those NBA, World University ranking, NIRF score, they will all automatically go up. So it's a cause and effect relationship, right? Chicken and egg. You don't want to focus on the numbers. You want to focus on the underlying improvements you need to do on a systematic basis.
Sir, I just want to add or get one clarity from the NRF slides that you have shown. The weightage given to NRF, the criteria is like teaching, learning, curriculum, and research. It itself is 60%, 30-30.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Whereas in NBA, teaching, learning process, curriculum, etc., everything is 150 marks out of 1000. So that comes to around 15%. So I can just analyze that teaching, learning, and research
Research.
itself in NRF actually takes
Big.
a very big role.
Yes, 60% is
Yeah.
right there. Yeah. Yeah, and that is the part of the education institute's output, right? Teaching, learning, and research. And other those things are, as a result, do you graduate people on time? Are you doing any outreach? And what is the perception about your institute? So those are the secondary things. That's why they get lesser points. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I have not gone into depth on NBA.
NBA teaching, learning, and research together comes to around 25 to 30%, whereas in NRF it is 60%. So just the double.
1 to 2. Yeah. So
Thank you
that
so much,
focus is
sir.
right. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir. I think what you rightly said is that we focus more on compliance than on excellence. Examination itself is a fine example, where we are so worried about having an examination, having the marks recorded so that, we are complying to the needs of NBA or the university or the or AICT. But then there you're losing out on excellence. So it happens at various phases, and unfortunately, I think we must come out of this fear and then move towards, creating an excellent institution. Once again, I would have wanted to, summarize. I've written every point, and it was so lovely hearing you and touching upon every aspect of creating quality standards in the institution. I think that's what NILF is all about, and you touched upon every aspect of it. So once again, thanks a lot, sir, from all of us, from all the faculties who are here. We have around, I think we had touched close to 50. So now it's around 46, but it was a wonderful session for all of us. I think it's Dil Mange more, and we would definitely want to be connected with you and would love to have more sessions from your end, sir. Thanks a lot.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you all, and appreciate this opportunity to share a few thoughts. And of course, it's not the end of everything, right? We just start the discussion. A lot more work needs to be done behind the scene. Just pick up few ideas, and my request will be on community service. I'll be very delighted because I've been in this field for the last 50 years. And I've done many things, including Blind Foundation work, and then currently the education effort in India, etc. So lots of examples we can share and motivate all students. And whatever you are doing, you can double it every year. So it accelerates the progress, and you become the role model in India for others to emulate. So with that, wish you all very best, and thank you all for your time and interest. So I want to take your leave, and I'll be sharing my presentation very shortly with Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.